So a little bit of a Sunday morning video, early Sunday morning for me, but by the time the video goes up, it'll be proper Sunday morning for you. So I've got on the screen the from Heritage Auctions, the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, the SGC 9.5. We've actually talked about it a little bit over the last couple of weeks on the live stream. We didn't talk about it this past Friday though, because we were about less than a day away from it ending. So it was ending basically Saturday night into Sunday morning, as it currently stands. And this is something I'd love for maybe the Heritage website to update. I'm actually not sure if the auction is officially done at this point. It was an extended bidding and it has moved over the last several hours. So I've kind of been keeping an eye out on it. I wanted to kind of get a sense of where we were. So I guess if it still moves a little bit more, you'll know about it by the time you see the video or maybe a couple of hours thereafter, and I'll update the description accordingly. I'll include a link to it as well if you're curious and want to check it out. So over the last several hours, it moved several $1 million, and then even more so with the buyer's premium. But as it sits right now and I'm recording this, we ended up with a $10.5 million bid with 12.6 when you add in the buyer's premium. So regardless, however you want to slice it, at the end of the day, this is the first 8-figure sports card in the history of the hobby. So for the most part, we had gotten out of the habit of really talking about, record price, because there was a stretch of time, especially during the earlier times of the boom, where we were doing record prices all the time and the numbers just kept getting bigger and bigger. And for a while, it was worthwhile talking about. But at this point, people have lost a lot of the sticker shock. But the first 8-figure, sports card, period, is still, kind of an interesting milestone to have crossed. Now, really, the only other reason I wanted to kind of talk about it for a little bit, and whether you know about it or not, one thing to bear in mind is that it's part of that Al Rosen find. It's got a really interesting backstory to go along with it. So feel free to check out like I said, in the description, I'll include a link to this one. You can check out some of the background and some of the provenance related to this card. It's kind of an interesting little backstory with it. And it reestablishes the 52 Topps Mantle as, the key card in the sports card hobby. So we'll see if one of the Wagners is able to come back and then potentially kind of leapfrog it and take back its spot there. It's basically the Wagner and the Mantle kind of neck and neck in that regard over time. But one thing that this kind of brings into play is obviously this is an SGC 9.5. Now, just a quick side to this. In my opinion, and we've had a chance to discuss this on the live stream, but I've also taken a look at them over time. In my opinion, I think I've gotten a chance to see all the three, because there are 3 different PSA 10s of this card as well. And I believe I've seen all 3 of them. I believe this to be, in my opinion, the best of the 4 cards that we're talking about. I do believe that this one is a nicer looking card from an eye appeal perspective, compared to the PSA 10 versions of this. But again, that's my opinion, and certainly you can go take a look at it for yourself and go do your own research on that. I believe this to be really one of the premium examples available of this card. If you're in this price bracket, this to me would be the card that I would go after between those 4 if you want to count the 3 PSA 10s. But the point is, with this auction result, whatever it ends up being, I'm just going to refresh it one more time just to make sure nothing happens. Okay, so the price stayed the same. But if this turns out to be the final price, or even a little bit more than this, fair enough, this is going to set the new standard, the new bar. But the question is going to be, for me as well as other folks, is going to be, does this motivate any of the PSA 10 owners to potentially test the market? Obviously, this is kind of a unique space with the economics the way they are, but at this price bracket, most of the time, people who are bidding on this kind of stuff are not affected by economic factors, inflation, or any of that the way that normal people are. So maybe it wouldn't matter one way or the other. It would be interesting to see, though, if one of the PSA 10s decided to test this market. So the question would become, like, if this price point, so 12.6 million right now, with the buyer's premium, how much more or less or the same would one of the PSA 10s get? The most infamous one right now is the Marshall Fogel copy, because he has kind of displayed it and at least, paraded it around a little bit. So at least that's got a little bit going for it. But certainly I'm sure a decent auction house could certainly drive up a little bit of hype for it. The question is how many of those high-profile bidders who maybe either took a shot at this and maybe didn't get it, or were in the running for this and maybe want to have several of the highest graded versions, who obviously have these kind of resources, would want to then take a run at that one. And the question is, would it surpass it? And if so, how much? And that would be kind of the real question. One of the fun things, obviously, that we talked about, and I've had this kind of offline conversation, is like, oh, the highest priced card is an SGC card. It's like, okay, I like stoking these third-party grading holy wars because, frankly, it's very entertaining. But the truth is, a card like this, it almost doesn't matter. Like, within reason, you could put this in any of the legitimate holders for any of the legitimate third-party graders, and you would get a very strong price. You could argue that there would be a little bit more or less depending on the company in question, but an SGC one is still going to sell at a premium price for this type of card. This is a premium card, it gets a premium price. A Honus Wagner is a premium card, it gets a premium price. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Obviously, we don't have the comparison. The only other card we have right now that was done, even in the last couple of years, really, that kind of reestablished the Mantle market and then moved it up a tier, was the Rob G PSA 9. That's the last one that I remember. That was the 5.2 million. That kind of left a question. Okay, what would a PSA 10, or in this case an SGC 9.5, what would something like that go for? Well, the answer we have for the SGC right now, as it stands, is a 12.6 million, potentially maybe a little more if the extended bidding hasn't ended. But that's kind of the angle I want to take on that in the question. Either way, this is the first 8-figure sports card in the history of the hobby. This one right here from the Rose and Fine. So link in the description if you want to check that one out. Very interesting. That's kind of why I wanted to follow it tonight and just see where it ended up. So if any of you guessed right around 12 million with buyer's premium, congratulations. You were the closest guesser, unless some late bid comes in that I haven't seen by the time this one goes up on the channel. Okay, second thing I wanted to talk about briefly. Real 27 guy here on Instagram. So this one we actually talked about briefly at the end of the live stream. So this is something that was sent to me right at the end, almost into the 5th hour. So obviously if you didn't catch it, I completely understand. So I'll summarize for you. So the Real 27 guy did a little bit of investigative work. It was actually very well done. So congratulations to Adam here as far as that's concerned. This is the post in question. So it's actually a 21-minute video where he goes into some detective work he did. From what he seems to have discovered is that there was an uncut sheet of 9798 Essential Credentials Futures that the concern was that it appears from what he's been able to deduce based on some information. And again, in the video, he goes into some details, showing some pictures and giving you a little information. It appears that someone purchased this uncut sheet, basically cut them, and then numbered them, basically adding the numbering to them, and then was able to get Beckett to grade them. So that's kind of the concerning part. There's multiple layers that are concerning. It was an uncut sheet that was then cut, and then the numbering was added to it, and then they were able to get Beckett into grading it, which as a result of it was being then consigned. So there's multiple layers to it. Beckett wasn't able to detect these basic, I won't say forgeries because it's not true. The cards are real cards, but it's one of those things. It's like a backdoor card. It's very similar to a lot of those backdoor cards, like the Fleer showcase cards from the past, where, yeah, it's a real card, but at the same time, this was never meant to go out. It was never in a pack. And in this case, it would be an uncut sheet. Now, one point I made on the live stream, we didn't know more about it at that moment. We were just giving initial thoughts. I know that Beckett does grade cards that are sheet cut. So basically, if somebody does an uncut sheet and they are able to cut the cards, Beckett does grade that, or at least historically they have. But in this case, the key is that the numbering was added artificially. So by adding that numbering into it, it's to try to misrepresent it as a real Essential Credentials Futures, which is very problematic, and the Beckett didn't detect it. That's problematic. Adding the serial number part to it and then passing it through to Beckett, that's problematic. So overall, I would recommend for you, if you've got the time, to check out this video. It gives a very compelling case that this appears to be exactly what has occurred. So kudos to the Real 27 guy for putting these pieces together and getting the evidence. It is circumstantial, but it's very compelling evidence, I would say, and definitely something worth keeping an eye out on. And we'll have to see what the reaction is from Beckett as pertaining to grading these cards, because adding this serial numbering to it and having Beckett actually legitimize it by grading it is super problematic and kind of a bit of a concern. I know we have a lot of fun with Beckett on the live stream as well. It's kind of one of our running jokes. But either way, it doesn't matter. Anytime that any of the third-party graders have one of these issues, it is always generally concerning, something to keep an eye out on, and something that unfortunately is probably going to become more prevalent as people are just going to, and this is maybe a theme for a video down the road here, people are going to test these third-party graders, all of them. So it's like, it doesn't matter which one is your preference. People are going to keep testing these third-party graders because at the end of the day, the money, the financial incentive is so great that there is plenty of good reasons to try. And one of the key things here about this uncut sheet is it wasn't like it was a cheap uncut sheet. I think it was the example that he looked at and the one he was able to detect here, I think was over $10,000. So they paid $10,000 to try to pull this stunt. It wasn't like a small investment to try to do this. And then you've got to try to add the serial numbering in there, and then you submit it trying to pass it as the real deal. Now, in this case, it appears they were at least partially successful, at least for a time, before obviously some detective work was done here. But the point is, there is a big financial incentive to try, and if somebody's willing to pay $10,000 for a sheet to give this a shot, that's something you have to kind of bear in mind. Like, think of how much money they thought they could make out of this if they had been successful and nobody had picked up on it. So it's just some things to think about here. I'll leave a link to this Instagram post in the description as well if you want to check it out. So a couple of things here, like I said, on a Saturday night into Sunday morning, a little bit of an around a hobby thing for some stuff that we didn't get to touch on. So by the way, you can see there on the screen a little bit of looking into some of those uncut sheets because that was part of the detective work Adam Real 27 guy did here. So that's it for me this time around. More videos come up on the channel. Live streams, we're going to keep doing them on Fridays, not 8 p.m. Eastern time as we've been doing for a while. I think that's going to be the new permanent time now for the Fridays. It's working out pretty well for us. And then we'll see what else the hobby has to in store for us in the upcoming week. That's it for me for now. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.